I'll call it a shithole, because that's what war is. It's a shithole. It's a place nobody wants to be. And unfortunately, once you're there, you're there. So one day it just occurred to me when my mother says to me, she says, you know, considering that you don't have much of a relationship anymore with your dad, how would you like to go into foster home? So I went into a foster home. It was probably the best thing that had ever happened to me. Went there for 4 years. Once I got back, I went to high school, and then I decided that I wanted to do something different. Talked to my mother, and I said, if I go into the Marine Corps, will you sign off on me to leave school early? She says, as long as you can go ahead and finish your schooling while you're in the military, I'll go ahead and do that. So I told my dad, I said, hey, Dad, I said, I'm going in the Marine Corps, and I'm leaving. Well, my dad wasn't really happy about that, in the respect that he didn't really support me, you know. He said that, good luck, and if you can make something of yourself, go in and get your 20 years. And that was the last time I saw him. I concentrated on doing what I needed to do, and that was become a Marine. So I sat down on my wooden box, and I wrote my first letter to my dad. I didn't think that he had really much hope in me, but with that being said, I wrote the letter to him anyway. And I said, hey, Dad, I just want to let you know, man, I'm coming home as a Marine. I miss you, and I hope that you're proud of me. My drill instructor called me into the office. He says, I have some unpleasant news for you that your father died. He asked me if I wanted to go home. But he did explain to me that if I went home, that I wouldn't graduate with platoon 1025. So I got on the phone and I talked to my mother. And she told me, she says, son, just stay. You really didn't know your dad that much anyways. So just stay and graduate and come home. And then you can pay your respects then. So I graduated and went home. I went to my dad's grave for the first time. And I pulled a button off of my uniform and I shoved it in the ground. Then I went back to infantry training school back out in California. Right. Once I graduated back off of that, I was told that I was going to Hawaii and I'll be stationed in Pearl Harbor. I moved forward to Camp Lejeune, North Carolina, and ended up with 2nd Battalion, 6th Marines. I spent some time down there, did a couple show of force landings over in Cuba back in the day, because obviously there were still things going on back then. So about 2 weeks later, I was told that I'm going to the colonel's office. So I went to the colonel's office and he said to me, he says, well, he says, I guess I'm shipping you back to Hawaii. He says, I don't know how this happened, he says, but you're going. He says, you're going to be an amphibious Marine. I said, all right. Where else can you go in the world and get paid for it? Go to Australia, come on, really? Melbourne, Perth. I said, look at all these people, they're drinking. Africa was a real great place. Stopped in there, Kenya, Nairobi, Kenya. One day we would stop in Diego Garcia, Who would think of Diego Garcia? If you want to know what Diego Garcia is, it's a little bump in the ocean. There's nothing there. I stopped at Subic Bay about 4 different times. I traveled all over the world. Most people have that in their bucket list at a ripe old age of 60, 70 years old to go to these places, and I did it all before I was 21. It was a vacation, but then it was all back to the same business. Living on an aircraft carrier with approximately 3,500 Navy personnel and Marines. So when I got out of the Marine Corps, I got out for about 13 years. I went back in 1993. And what had happened was I ended up becoming a heavy equipment engineer in the Army Reserve. And I really enjoyed that. Christian, I had a great time. I went to school to learn how to operate scrapers, dozers, and so on. And he gave me another part of some construction trade that I could maybe use on the outside. I went to did a project in Belize. We worked on schools. I went over to Germany, did some work over there on a couple occasions, working on the airfields. We weren't going to do much more traveling, so I was like, well, maybe I should go do something else. So I went ahead and joined the National Guard.
So you said to me earlier, sort of off camera, that you didn't come back from Iraq the same man. What changed over in Iraq?
When you see people laying out on the street dead, there's no life in them anymore. Whether it's a good guy, bad guy, or anything else, it just changes your perspective on it. I mean, that's the moment in time when you realize that you're in war. And the sad part about it is that's when you really, truly realize that you can't call the police. You can't call 911. You're really in the shit. I mean, you actually think that you're seeing things, but you're not. It's war. You see people's extremities stuck on the side of a mud wall, or it looks like a big gob of glue, and it's actually somebody's brains. I can tell you on countless occasions, people are dying. Good, innocent people. Somebody's son, somebody's husband, somebody's sister. So, yeah, it's almost 3.5 years in that, I'll call it a shithole, because that's what war is. I was with a 155 Howitzer Paladin unit, and we were notified that our unit was getting disbanded. The commander had made it perfectly clear that a lot of us were losing our jobs. So at the end of the weekend, we were going to have to make a decision on what jobs that we were going to take. It came down to one that was called a 92 mic. Everybody's like, well, what's a 92 mic? And that was a mortuary affairs. Everybody was like, oh, I ain't doing that. And I'm like, oh, okay. So I looked around and I was asking everybody, I said, what's the big deal? And I told our commander, I said, hey, I says, I'm interested in that position. So lo and behold, there was an opening at Dover Air Force Base, Delaware. Soldiers were either injured or killed in the line of duty, lost their lives. We would get their personal belongings, and we would do a complete inventory and ensure that everything was prepared in a dignified way for those of our heroes that lost their lives. You peer into an individual's life completely. You get to read their notes, their love letters, letters from home. It's a little bit different when you have adults talking to each other, you know. But when you have a child that had made a picture with crayons and that little child wrote on there, "I miss you, Daddy." And sometimes when you go home and you sit and think about those things, that's when the survivor guilt kicks in. I'm here, he's gone. And I got to send this stuff back to that family. And that child's going to grow up without his father. It was my drive and my goal to work at the mortuary side. I didn't realize what I was getting into until I got there, but it was a huge impact for me because I was seeing death on a daily basis. I did a lot of really high-profile cases, Navy SEALs, the Benghazi. I did the Ambassador Stevens and the SEALs, and it changed my way of thinking on things. How did this happen? We have the best fighting force in the world. Why did we leave our people behind? You know, in the military, Chris, you know as well as I do, you leave no man behind. So apparently you and I, our thinking is completely different than what Hillary Clinton's is and what President Obama's is and what the politicians. They have a complete different thinking. But when I see the war and how it's going and all the money that's being spent and the people that are left behind, like we were talking about this Benghazi thing, now that I look back on it, it's pretty pathetic. I've seen soldiers, I've seen airmen, I've seen sailors, I've seen them all come back in different shapes, different forms. Sometimes you only got a half a person back. We had a soldier that was killed. I picked up the family. They came in, they seen the dignified transfer. I says, you know, you as a father are not supposed to come and pick up your son like this. And I will tell you, this will be the last time that I'm going to do this. This is my moment in time when I say I have to give this up. Because when I look at you as a father, and your son is on that plane, you're a better man than I am. To see a father pick up his son and bring him home in a casket is just morally not right. And it was at that moment. You said, you know, you said, I met a lot of generals in the last day. He says, but I want to tell you, he says, you know, Staff Sergeant Kipp, he says, if there's any person that I'll ever remember, it's you. He says, because you work from your heart. He says, everything that you do and have said to me has been more compassionate words than any general can tell me. When that plane left the tarmac, with that escort and that father and that son, I rendered my salute. I went back to my commander and told him I'm done. I said, "C'est la vie." I hung it up. So here I am.